Hello and welcome to the February 2024 coffee break. My name is Andrew Miller, your host, lead principal technologist, joined this month by Anthony Nocentino, second time guest. Thank you, Anthony. It's been a year and a half or so. I do want to acknowledge up front that if you joined us last month, you probably heard that we were going to have Marsha Pierce on. Due to an unavoidable scheduling conflict, could not have Marsha on. She's still amazing and awesome. Anthony, thank you so much for jumping in the boat with me to cover roughly similar topics, although of course it's going to have your own twist too. So, thank you for being here.
Right. Thanks for having me, sir.
As always, a little bit of housekeeping. This is a series, as you know. So, coffee break. Hey, there's a fancy logo. If you want to find all the previous coffee breaks, and actually, I just realized I need to change that to say happy third anniversary. So, we'll just call that out. But we're actually in our third year now. And if you actually go to that link, the bit.ly link, or I think Sean or Andy are going to put that in the chat. You can actually find them sorted by topics as well, because it's more of a solution focus. The first half is educational and about the landscape and career tips and tricks, all that kind of stuff. The second half is about what Pure does in the space. Personally, I think they've aged better than various other webinars and podcasts out there. You can also find them at purestorage.com/events, along with a bunch of other great series that are sometimes more specifically technical, that have celebrities on board, that are customer focused. You can find replays there as well for other events. In case you're joining for the gift card, yes, we do that for the first 1,000 participants to register and attend. $10 coffee e-gift card. Hopefully you're joining for more than that based on the attendance numbers we've been seeing. That's not the only draw. Like, it's good stuff and it's interesting too. Hopefully there's a drawing at the end. Please stay around for that. That will be for an Ember mug. Retail value $130, the kind you can control with your phone. If you are in these categories, we appreciate you attending, but as I think we can't send you gift cards. And we actually started to see more folks outside of the U.S. and Canada joining, which is great too. We appreciate that. There's actually a coffee break series in Europe as well too. I am your host, Andrew Miller. In this case, as always, I'm not going to introduce myself because, hey, I'm on every month. But as it relates to the topic of databases and a DBA joining, I was never a DBA. I worked with DBAs, but I remember at the very beginning, even as the infrastructure guy, I was responsible for the MySQL and the Postgres installs. But like the serious stuff was SQL Server and Informix and DB2. Those were the adult databases that had like the dedicated people. And I supported them and we all got along fine, actually, kind of thing. But, there's been a mix. Anthony, if you don't mind introducing yourself again, but it's been a year and a half. So please.
Sure. Oh, all right. Well, thanks for having me. Number one. Number two, I'm Anthony Nocentino, a principal field solution architect at Pure. As Andrew indicated, I specialize in database systems and also in cloud and Kubernetes, kind of my jam as well. I blog a lot, which is now on nocentino.com since I came to Pure after my years as a consultant. So if you know the old blog, that's all been ported over to the new blog. I write a bunch of code and I teach as much as I possibly can in our technical communities in the SQL Server world, but also a Pluralsight.
I think I remember some numbers around Pluralsight. It's in this 8 or 9 figures number of views, something like that, but it's actually it's really cool.
So. Yeah, it's pretty humbling to have that level of impact to help people learn technologies and capabilities in the cloud and things like that.
So if you find Anthony's voice soothing, having trouble staying awake falling asleep at night, you can go to Pluralsight. You'll learn great stuff and great soothing tones too. So it's a backhanded compliment, maybe.
That's what one of our coworkers came up to me last week in Chicago. He's like, Anthony, I got to tell you, the Kubernetes training is great with the voice. Oh, it's all about the voice. I was like, yes, thank you.
This is where good microphones help too. I think both of us, just saying. I'll speak for myself. Okay. Next month, I'm going to be joined again by actually someone who's been kind enough to guest host twice, but it's been a while since I've had him on as a guest. Jason Walker, Global Practice Leader for Modern Data Protection. We're going to wander through a little bit of kind of a restore journey, if you will. It's going to be embracing Pure's modern data and portfolio, but actually looking at tracking trends through history, even the accelerating pace of change in this space. We'll do a little bit of choose your own adventure where we'll follow different scenarios and how that maps to the Pure portfolio and the benefits, fast restore, low cost, ransomware, compromised admin credentials, all that stuff. But we are now into this month. So as always, a little bit of a lightweight agenda. I end up kind of trying to be consistent here just because it makes it easier for preparation, but also hopefully for you two to kind of know what you're getting. So if the odd couple is too much of a historical reference, we could go with unlikely pairings, right? So this could be, cheese and whatever else you want to pair with that, whether that's wine or other things. But DBAs and storage admins. First, first half, a little bit agnostic. No, going through a little bit of your history, Anthony.
Yeah.
Even since we met before, DBA to a storage company, say what calculus two, except actually we're going to hold some of the calculus for part two, where databases come from. Where do databases come from, by the way, Anthony? Can you help me out with that?
Oh, wow, that's a tough one. Well, I mean, we're in the days of like writing information down and sticking it into boxes and having to pull that back out wasn't an efficient way of storing data, although I've seen some storage devices that operate about that fast. But as you progress, really it's about accessing the information and retrieving the information in an efficient way. And that really is the growth of databases over time. Like we'll talk a little bit about kind of that concept of applied computer science, and that's really that story of getting access to data in an efficient way, right?
So this is why you're the subject matter expert and I'm the host in this case, because I was totally thinking of like, you have one database server and another database server and they love each other very much. And there's
Oh,
a new,
geez.
but I guess that's not the right answer. So I think your answer was better.
I would always make the joke about, especially back when we had to like go and install a SQL server in a data center by sticking a DVD in the server. I'm like, yeah, we'd have to keep the DVD in the CIO's desk so that we could have to go to them and say, hey, can I install this SQL server? And they would have to say yes or no, right? Because otherwise that Microsoft true up would get a little spicy at the end of the year, right?
I don't know where those came from. Okay. Number three, so where databases come from, why storage matters to DBA. This will start to wonder in some pure capabilities, but still in a kind of a structural, architectural way. It's a bird, it's a plane. Databases in the cloud and why. It's all about data services, just a little bit of, a tip. And then what's new, especially from a Pure perspective. But even some of this is what Pure's doing, but it aligns to industry trends too. So everywhere you look, databases. If you don't mind, Olivia, kicking off the first poll before we dive into section number one. Thank you. So this is, as often, a little bit more kind of open-ended. So all about you. Would love to understand your role. We will share these polls back as we go along the way. We'll leave this open for a couple minutes and then close the poll out and share the results before the next one. So you can see some of the information here too. It's not just us, getting it for ourselves. Talking about containers and Kubernetes. Are you doing anything there? And AI ML. Are you actually doing anything there? So I'll just leave that poll, drag that over to the side and leave that open. But thinking about a little bit, just as we were chatting ahead of time, because we prepare a little bit, but not word for word. Thinking about your history, Anthony. I mean, one of the interesting things is there's this gentleman named Mike Richardson, who's actually now in both our reporting chains. But when you were a consultant, it's like, is he listening in now? Maybe he
right.
he is. I'm not even going to go search, but historically, when you were a consultant, database consultant, he actually was an SE who installed the first Pure storage array that you worked with, I think. Do you mind kind of wandering through that story a little bit?
Sure. So yeah, independent consultant for about 12 and a half years before I came to Pure. And in 2015, this was kind of the era of tiered storage where you had spinning drives front ended with SSDs, and there'd be some magic that moved them between the two. And in the end, everyone was sad, right? Because it was in variable workloads, yada, yada. So my customer at the time was like, hey, we're getting this thing from Pure. It's called a flash array. They're going to put it in a data center. It's all flash. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. Because at the same time, academically, I was working on solid state data access algorithms in grad school. I'm like, oh, all right, this kind of makes sense. I kind of learned a little bit about the architecture, and it was a VMware environment at the time, and I SV motioned the workload onto the flash array. And so Monday comes, the business day starts at the customer site. All the numbers I wanted to get bigger got bigger, throughput. All the numbers I wanted to get smaller got smaller, latency. But I no longer had a storage bottleneck. The previous system had a 20 millisecond disk time.
You moved the bottleneck.
So all that CPU, all that data flew into the CPUs and lit those things up like a Christmas tree. So I had to spend the rest of the day kind of tuning that workload back down to get it under control. So it was a really positive experience. I got to learn more and more about the company over time, the innovations that they were doing at the time. And so I kind of always followed Pure from an industry standpoint to see what they were doing. And then later on, things happened, and here I am. Right.
I'm going to toss one other story in there too. I remember, and this is all respect to everyone listening, DBAs, infrastructure, et cetera. There was a POC that I heard about from an SE,
Mhm.
and they actually moved over some production-ish workloads. Apparently, the customer was comfortable with it. Okay, but they didn't actually tell the DBAs because there were some databases in there. So storage vMotion, okay, the box is solid enough, fine. Move it over. No
Mhm.
one called throughout the POC. They did some testing, stuff seemed fine. And then they needed to take the box out because the POC was successful, but they had to take the box out and bring another box in and do some shifting around. Fine.
Sure.
However, when they storage vMotion the databases off of the pure box for the proof of concept and
Mhm.
moved it back to the box it had been on, then they got a call from the database administrator saying, like, hey, whatever you just did, like undo that, whatever it was. So didn't get a call when it got faster, but then when it went back to what it had been,
Yeah.
that's not even just a DBA thing. That's a human thing too, in general, almost.
What happened?
Mm-hmm. So, and let me even pull that thread a little more, Anthony. Now that I just told a random story, but why would
Sure.
you kind of wandered around this a little bit? Why? I think you had a customer even asked you recently. Why would you stop consulting and come
Yeah.
work at Pure?
So there's kind of I built my business in a very specific way. I never wanted to have multiple employees. I was just going to be me, and I knew it was just going to be me.
Mm.
That had to do with like financial responsibilities that I did not want to be a part of as a business owner, right? And one of the things that was kind of, I guess, a side effect of that is the access to the problems that I had as a consultant weren't as intellectually challenging as I wanted them to be.
Only so
So
much. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, I'd love helping customers, but I wanted to work on more interesting problems. And now at Pure, I get to work in some of the biggest systems on the planet with some of the smartest people on the planet and build new technologies and capabilities for platforms. And that is an amazing, amazing experience that I would not trade for anything. Don't tell my boss that. Actually, yeah, probably tell my boss that, but
We still like what we're
won't let him
paid.
know that I had to
We're
lose
not
my
offering a discount on
negotiation
your
chip there.
services.
Right.
The other the other thread I wanted to pull a little bit is you mentioned we talked about Pluralsight,
Mhm.
and even I think you said, or maybe I just heard it. Someone last week mentioning Kubernetes class. So
Yeah.
how does a DBA get into Kubernetes?
So that's pretty uh somewhat interesting story. And back in 2016, 17, I was at a Microsoft event in the data platform universe, and someone was talking about Kubernetes, and they were describing what Kubernetes did, kind of the idea behind declarative deployment, automated self-healing applications, right? Automated scaling of applications. And these are all problems that I was trying to solve at my customer sites, especially in like e-commerce. I had scaling issues that you'd have to go and clone a virtual machine 30 times. That's not efficient or fast. And so when we're looking at what Kubernetes brought to the party, it's kind of that dynamic scaling, automated deployment, deployments in code. That really, really, really caught my attention. I was like, this is going to be the future of how we manage systems in code, right? And so whether or not you're on the Kubernetes ship or not, pun intended, or you're using cloud and automation tooling, you have those concepts of when I build a thing, I'm going to do it in code. And so from that moment on, I spent a lot of time learning everything I possibly could about Kubernetes and building a practice around that in my consulting practice, and subsequently training part of a training part of the practice in my business.
Maybe last piece, and we may accelerate some of the other ones, but I feel like this is sometimes the most valuable for the audience. But um,
Mhm.
you and I have been doing this for a little while, as evidenced by, I think we were joking, like the color of your hair and the lack of my hair and
Yeah,
whatever else you want to put in there. Okay, fine. Any career advice that you have for folks that are different pathways from having been a consultant, having been at Pure, worked in
sure.
lots of different industries? Anything that you would highlight if given the opportunity?
Yeah, I think those two stories are kind of the key, right? In that the drive to do new things and in recognizing the new things, and that's what I've always done. Is I'm always learning, always continuing to find the new technology, the new technique to help solve the business problem that is presented to me, and that's the thing that I like to kind of hang my hat on most is learning, but also in context, right? I love making green lights blink in a data center, and I love making storage fly faster. But the reality is, we have to make sure that we're providing value to organizations that consume those things. And so, pay attention to that as well, right? Like, what's the industry trends in your universe, and where is the technology going to support those trends?
There was one other piece I'll even just highlight, because when you are talking, like that, and this was new to me, to be honest, so I appreciate it. About, even as you looked at the DBA landscape, there are even kind of two types of DBAs. You know, there are systems DBAs or maybe infrastructure DBAs. That was a little bit more of your background, even though
Right.
you've just said a bunch of stuff about automation and code thing. And then there are folks who come from a more developer standpoint, developer
Right.
DBAs. I think we even highlighted, and one of the folks here who's helping out with Q&A today, but super sharp in his own right, Andy Yoon, comes from a little bit of a developer DBA background. So there's kind of like overlapping Venn diagram circle stuff, but two different
Right.
almost personas there.
Yeah. But so challenge you slightly. I guess I shouldn't really do that to the
Please.
host. However,
Yeah, I didn't get it right.
um,
Yeah, look at that.
in the consulting practice, I said I was a single person, right? And the only way that I could scale was in code, right? So if I needed to do more things, I needed to be able to do that many things in code, because I can only click a mouse so fast, right? And I'd only provide so much business value to a customer. But if I write code for a repeatable process, then I'm starting to provide value to the organization because I'm doing things more efficiently at scale. Right. That was kind of the infrastructure elements of where I came from. And
Mm-mm-mm.
then obviously that kind of kept parlaying into uh, the other elements that I invested in with Kubernetes and whatnot. And then I did spend a little time on the developer side of the house, but I feel bad for whoever had to go read that code after. Well, it compiled, ship it.
Oh, I don't think we're going to tell the story. But you actually went to a bunch of custom. Well, actually, we are going to tell this. You know, you went back and found better ways to do things, even if you're like, hey,
Oh yeah.
let me update it. So, okay, I think I will go ahead and we'll put a wrap on kind of section number one. I'm going to go ahead
Okay.
and end this poll and share it back out to everybody. We'll wait a little bit for the second poll here, but just in case you're curious, you know, kind of the mix of folks who are
Ooh.
attending here. So you know, we've got a pretty. I mean, there are more infrastructure folks here, hands on, but there's a whole chunk of cloud people, DBAs, executives, architects. You know, 5% of something else. So a good mix.
Very good
Majority are doing
distribution.
something with containers and Kubernetes. Majority doing something
Yes.
with AI. So this is cool to hear. Okay,
Very cool.
I'm gonna stop sharing that, and we'll move into section two. So section two, where databases come from, why storage matters to DBAs. Obviously, already used up the, you know, two database servers love each other very much. Okay, fine. But let's get actually to a little bit of the history. Do you mind kind of?
Sure.
To me, this was actually kind of fun to go back to.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of what's old is new, or it's from way back, but man, it still applies. So, do you mind walking us through some of what we're seeing here?
Sure. So one of the things I spent a lot of time in school as a computer science nerd, undergrad and graduate school, and I'll walk through the slide kind of as a story. And I remember sitting in a 200 level algorithms class, writing seeks and scans and key lookups and hash tables and all that stuff. And I was like, why am I doing this? And in fact, I was, 20-year-old smug Anthony. I remember specifically the professor gave us a book. It was a photocopy of an old textbook from like the 70s that was typeset still. And this is the textbook. And so we're implementing all these algorithms. And I'm like, this is a complete waste of time because I can just go use a Java class and make this thing happen. Right. This
Mm-hmm.
early 2000s. So, and then we get to the end and I stop and I look around. I'm like, holy smokes, I just wrote a storage engine, right? Which is a core part of a database, meaning that's the part that goes and efficiently retrieves the information off of a storage device and presents it back to the system for consumption. And so at that time, we were optimizing for rotational disks and doing all that fun stuff that we had to do to make sure that that was efficient. And then kind of moving forward over time, as I learned a little bit more about other elements of computer science, you have things like systems with regards to how scheduling happens inside of a database engine, how threads are accessed, how IO is dispatched for contention, but also managing large buffer pools. And then you look at also the theory elements. Kind of there's this concept
Mm-hmm.
of relational calculus, which is the actual theoretical model of information
Underpinnings.
retrieval.
Yeah.
Right. And so now you start to see all these elements of what a database system actually is. I have the data itself, I have the system management in terms of resources, but also the theoretical model to go and access that information abstractly. Because one of the more crazy things about a database engine is this: the people that make database engines have no idea what data is going to go into that database engine,
You can't know.
right?
How would you know?
Right.
Yeah.
You just define the structure. And that's why
Mm-hmm.
DBAs, have jobs.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we're the ones that kind of have to maintain that thing over time. And
Set them
that
up.
really that that kind of idea of applied computer science takes kind of that relational theory from Edgar Cod. Is that a fish? That is a fish on this slide there.
Yes. I was wondering if you're
Uh,
going to call it out or I was going to call it. It
right.
just made me happy to have a fish there for that one. Just because, hey,
Yeah.
yeah.
Taking the disk access work from IBM in the 50s and 60s and all of those elements together. And that's where we're at today, kind of the relational database model and how that applies. Right. So super fun stuff. It's infinitely deep topic because of all of those elements.
For anybody who is curious here, actually, I'll put this in the chat in just a minute, but you can literally still find this. You can still find this paper. It's not actually crazy long, and it's only 11 pages. It is frankly a little bit dense from it's a paper. It's an academic paper, standpoint. So if you want to go back to this and even have a little bit of like, hey, I'm going back to college, like you were saying, Anthony, you can go read through this. And I think that what we were talking that even informed one of the blogs that you wrote about SQL Server IO size. But I think I got that in order. So a little bit of a shout out for a blog post.
Yeah, I
So
think one of the learning elements that I do, and I talked about like cutting edge things and paying attention to what's next, is a lot of the things that we do today are based off of foundational technologies and techniques from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And so I still keep all of my college textbooks here because the foundations of those exist from way before what we have today. And that blog post specifically, if you want to pop that up for a second, is that content is founded in a textbook that I had in the 90s on how the NTFS file system is laid out. And then I go ahead and kind of build up from there and show you how data is stored inside of SQL Server and how it varies in size. And so don't forget foundations either, right? I think that's another important element for me to hang my hat on as I built my career over time.
we've been actually doing stuff both here and otherwise with Pure with the 15 architectural decisions. So started actually almost 15 years ago with Pure, and we keep pulling stuff out. It's not since the 60s, so some of it's even based on things from then. But even within Pure, we're actually still pulling out and building off of those foundations versus doing totally different stuff. I know that when you and I have spent a good bit of time together, Anthony, it's often been at what we call sometimes as Pure EBCs on the road. It's where Pure will bring a bunch of folks, executives, subject matter experts, et cetera, into a city, and then we'll do rent some space in hotel and conference rooms and have presenters kind of rotate between the rooms. Often in that kind of context, you're chatting with. So this is the deep history, right?
Right.
But you're talking with executives about what are the big things, the big categories of items. And yes, this is a Pure slide, so for everyone looking cool. But these are categories. There's not Pure in the titles. You might kind of walking through a little bit. Let's pull it from the historical depth side into the current things that CIOs care about and ask you to go deeper on. So if you would.
Yeah. So the kind of the big bucket items is, I think, what databases on Pure, right? What that means to a customer. And the first one are performance. The reality is people don't care about microseconds or milliseconds. They care about when the customer clicked the button, did the thing happen, right? Did the shopping cart close? Did the medical record load? Did the package ship? Whatever that is. And that's where performance matters, especially in a relational database. I like to kind of get a little geeky about this for a second when we talk about things like log throughput. That's a problem that we can help attack in your organization, right? Because if someone goes and clicks buy now in your shopping cart and the thing spins, what are they going to do? They're going to go buy now from your competitor, right? And so that's a huge business value, is being able to take that performance and apply that in a business context, right? Yeah. And then snapshots, I think Andy Yoon,
Spend
who's on
more
the
time
call,
on this.
got lots of stuff in here, has a great visualization of what this really means inside of a flash array. The ability to snapshot and clone a database or a volume that contains a database instantly. And on the surface, you're like, what does that mean? It's access to data is what that really means. If I have a 10 terabyte database or a 100 terabyte database, if I need to snapshot that and clone that to make that available to another part of the organization instantly, right? This happens instantly versus having to take a backup and restore 100 terabytes of data somewhere in a data center, which is hard. There's a whole bunch of other elements that we'll get into later about that. I think the other big one, especially when we're talking to IT leadership about cloud and what's next, and specifically in the context of customers and how they build integrations, is our API strategy, whether you're on-prem or in the cloud. If you write an integration in either one of those environments, that integration will work on either side. So if you pick up our PowerShell module and write a business process to snapshot and clone a database on-prem, and that becomes core to providing value to your business to get access to data. If your CIO comes along and says, "Hey, it's time to migrate to the cloud," because
To
that's
the
how
cloud.
cloud strategies work, right? Well, you can take that integration, you can pick that up, and you can use that in our cloud offerings, and that is of extraordinary value because you don't have to go learn new things or change code and techniques in a cloud migration. And then the simplicity element is also, I think, equally as amazing. Andy and I were at Pass Summit this past year, and Paul Randall, who's kind of a big kind of force in the SQL Server community, is he's at our booth. We had a FlashArray XL130 in the booth, and it's 5U, right? And it's like, "Hey, Anthony, how much storage can you put in this thing?" So I think at the time it was like 3.5 petabytes. He's like, "You have got to be kidding me! In a 5U device, I could put 3.5 petabytes
Kind of scary, actually,
and
in
have
a way.
zero performance, right, degradation." And the idea is the simplicity of that is there's less stuff, less surface area of things to go wrong. But you're right, the blast radius can be narrow. So that's where the next bullet point comes in, is the idea of 6 nines, being able to maintain that platform over time
Mm-hmm.
without having to ring up the DBAs and say, "Hey, I need to get downtime for 3 hours on a Tuesday to do this thing." That doesn't exist on our platforms because of that right there, right? The non-disruptive upgrades. And then snapshots and clones and rapid restore, which we'll get into all that as we go through today. But the ability to give you the tools and techniques that you need to protect large databases, uh, and snapshot and clone those to protect them, but also to use native backups if that's still part of your recovery strategy. So all of these are kind of the key things that I'm talking to leadership about. And even the technical folks, we just kind of steer the conversation in a much more bits and bytes way, right?
And a little bit of a choose your own adventure. Which of
Oh yeah.
these priorities resonate for you? And then let's go dig into them. And if you want to do all of them, we won't have enough time in any single meeting. We'll do follow ups, and that's fine. That's what we're here for. Okay. Let's go ahead and launch. The sections are going to are going to kind of blur together a little bit, but that's good. So we're going to take kind of a manual pause here for a minute. If you don't mind, Olivia, launching poll number 2 first, because section number 3, as you see here, is going to get into, and I'll narrate the questions from it. It's a bird, it's a plane, databases in the cloud, and why. So poll question number 1, are you running databases in the cloud? I'll try to give some variability of answers. Please feel to put more in the chat, because you can even, chat amongst yourselves, because you may find something interesting from somebody else, kind of thing. As well as we're just going to go there and ask our snapshots backups. And we're actually going to ask this question twice. I'm telling you this now, because we're actually going to explore this idea a little bit. Hopefully not in a too painful way, because sometimes it is the fourth answer there. Let's stop arguing about it. Let's argue about something else that's more fun. Whatever you like that is. So
that was a question in my interview loop, actually, when they were like, "Are they use our snapshots backup?" And I gave the middle of the road answer, but
good
I have
consulting answer. It depends, but on these factors. I know enough factors to make it sound legit. Yeah. So I'm actually going to summarize a little bit of the lead in here for you, Anthony, if you don't mind. So sometimes there's the question of why are we going to the cloud? And I think you actually already kind of alluded to a little bit. There are times where it can be literally about, well, because the CIO said so, or the board said so, or because we have this investment. It can be for technical reasons. It can be for flexibility reasons, for shift in business model. That's sometimes about CapEx and OpEx, but it's more than that often, or it should be, hopefully, frankly, more than that, to be honest. But there are often common pitfalls there, or challenges, like we're 10 years into this thing, around cost, complexity, application refactoring, or even you were referring to like kind of process refactoring, like you wrote all this PowerShell or whatever automation tool you prefer, and then of course the disruption to operation. So from a pure standpoint, what we can do foundationally is say, hey, you're using FlashArray on-prem. We have Cloud Block Store that can provide you the same data services. We're starting to get to the why in the cloud as on-prem that might not exist otherwise. I'm going to toss the ball back to you here, though, Anthony. Please, about this kind of there.
Absolutely. So this is one of the reasons why I came to Pure, as I learned about the cloud strategy that we have, and realizing that effectively Pure's operating system provides this homogeneous data plane wherever you have data, right? And it kind of blurs the lines between what's on-prem and what's in the cloud, because of things of snapshots and clones and how we replicate data, how we can move data between storage devices in a very, very, very space efficient and time efficient way, right? And that strategy was really what piqued my interest about coming here and learning about this product specifically, Cloud Block Store, and how to leverage that in our customers. So whether you're going to go hybrid, right? Maybe you're doing a scale out architecture. We have customers that will swing workloads into the cloud. They'll scale out for compute through a busy season, scale back down, and then repatriate the workload. Or maybe it's a DR play where you just want to get your data into another physical data center and just swipe your credit card rather than having to build another data center at some other part of the country. Or you're going all in cloud, right? And those data services still apply, whether it's across regions or in a cloud or between clouds, right? So that kind of homogeneous data plane is really the key there. And things like storage efficiency, data reduction, data services are really things that historically provide a value on-prem, also are of value in the cloud.
I was actually presenting on this a couple of years back, and unbeknownst to me, via Zoom, someone walks in partway through the meeting who's a cloud architect and actually doesn't have any experience from a data center on-prem standpoint. It's not bad, just background. So I started talking about how, with Cloud Block Store, you can do array level synchronous replication, even, a virtual storage array, Cloud Block Store in AWS. And he stops the meeting. He's like, you can't do that in the public cloud. There's nothing that offers that service. I try and be very positive, engaging. And it's like, well, that's actually the whole reason we're here, because actually you're right. You can't do that with the native primitives. And it's not about diminishing our public cloud partners. It's about making it better. And they're kind of bigger than we are, AWS and Azure. So they partner with us because we have a decade plus of experience around all these data services that have business value. We can talk about them in technical terms, but you pull it up the stack. This doesn't stop, though, with just Cloud Block Store. There's even a tighter partnership with Azure around Azure VMware Solution. So AVS stands for Azure VMware Solution. This is actually where you can run VMware in Azure, powered by Cloud Block Store. So you're getting all the benefits that you would want out of Pure, say data reduction and provisioning, all the other pieces listed here, but with a fully hosted VMware service in Azure. That's the lead in, though, because you were going, but actually both, but more you, because that's your job. Why does this matter? It's about the services.
Right.
And that's where I want to spend the next little bit of this section here, actually. So when you were here about a year and a half ago now, 17 months, but who's counting? We had some
Clearly
fun.
You are.
We had a little bit of fun with a database time machine. I know that you love to talk about, we can literally bend space and time when it comes to working with large databases. Do you mind just kind of explaining that? And I might click along the slides here as you're going there.
Yeah. So the bend space and time thing is the DBAs have this thing called like size of data operations. If I run a backup, I'm literally picking up all the data and throwing it into a file over there, right? And or if I'm doing availability or group replication, things like that, it takes time because the data is of some size. And historically, the only way to attack that problem was bigger pipes and faster CPUs, right? Mm-hmm. And what we've done in Purity is applied data reduction, right? So then we can get all the compression and deduplication that comes along with that, but also the ability to do snapshots and clones. And this concept of baselining of snapshots as well is very critical to how we can attack that problem. Meaning, I'm never going to send the same byte twice between two storage devices. Mm-hmm. Okay. So if I have a 100 terabyte database, I need to replicate to a cloud or to another flash array or to another data center. I'm only going to change, or the next time I take a snapshot, I'm going to take the subsequent snapshot. The only thing that's going to go in that second snapshot is the change the blocks, right? So if that's a 100 terabyte database, that is a massive value to you as a DBA and to your business to get that data between those two sites or those two storage devices quickly. And so we can unlock a whole bunch of capabilities with snapshots, or like I was talking about a second ago, replication of snapshots between arrays. So extraordinarily powerful concept there. Yeah.
I'm just kind of playing this out. I may cherry pick a little bit here. I think I'm in.
Sure.
We'll summarize a little bit here, some pieces, but just there is sometimes a little bit of. Actually, I'm going to go forward and then we'll go back. there is
Okay.
sometimes a little bit of PTSD for folks out there. I'm seeing some great comments in the chat. I really appreciate it around snapshots being great. But at the same time, you can recognize that people may have been like, but I tried this before and it didn't work out on this platform or in that way, or I got in trouble or something filled up or the dedo crawler ran long. No, I'm not using
Oh yeah.
personal examples at all. So recognize we can talk about application consistent, crash consistent, at a database level, even vendor specific. We
Oh
start to
yeah.
think about VSS and third-party tools. There's even point-in-time recovery and portability and performance, consistency. All of these items are ones that if people would like to go deeper on to know how life is better now than it may have been in the past when you tried this stuff and you had trouble, that's where you
Yes.
reach out to your Pure team. And Anthony and Andy can actually go way deeper into this and help you understand the things that have shifted there. And hopefully, if you're with us today, you're seeing it already in the chat, people saying like, "Hey, actually, this is true. Like the stuff they're saying is true. It's not just made up." Anything else you want to highlight here, Anthony, before we go back to the last one? Just go fully into our snapshots backups.
Sure. I think the use cases is here is what's important, right? We know what a snapshot is. It's a point in time representation of the data that I can clone and present to another thing, right? But really think about what you can do with that, right? Anytime you're moving data between SQL servers, whether it's with backup and restore, availability groups, transactional replication, you can stop doing that and leverage snaps and clones to do it instantly, right? I'm like, and now try this, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
as seen on TV, but the really unlocking those capabilities and accelerating the access to the data is what matters. So dev test refreshes, being able to take a snapshot before an application upgrade. How many of us have to support third-party applications where a third-party vendor slid a T-SQL script across the table and said, run this script? And you ran it in dev and it worked great. You ran it in QA, it worked great. And then you ran it in prod, something went wrong. And next thing you know, you're restoring an 87 terabyte database on a Saturday. And the CIO says, hey, when's that going to be done? And the idea here is being able to leverage a snapshot to instantaneously revert the system back to the previous state. These are the core capabilities that I want our customers to think about when they hear snapshots is this is the stuff that we help you with, right? It's
Business
these
value.
challenges. Yeah.
Sean already put it in the chat. I appreciate it. I like to signs refer because I've worked with snapshots on a lot of different platforms, and snapshots on Pure, what snapshots want to be when they grow up. And then you can unpack that so many different ways.
Yeah.
Last piece here before we go into the what's new and close out the
Sure.
poll is this is where we're just going to have a little bit of fun with a controversial topic. So
Mhm.
as it backups, if you have a SQL server, you've got storage arrays, you've got data in one place, you can replicate it and then replicate it again, on-prem, highly available, different site. You
Oh,
can
yeah.
actually clone things. You can clone it again. Is that a backup? Is it a snapshot? What else did I miss there? I gave the short version.
So I think when you look at, for me, well, all a backup does is gives you the ability to put your database back into a previous state, right? If you look at the actual structure of a SQL Server backup specifically, there's an MTF header, Microsoft tape format, for the folks that remember that.
Way
And
back.
then all that happens is the database engine just copies the pages into the backup file, and then that's your backup. And then your restore takes all of those things out and sticks them back into the previous state. So why don't I just rely on storage to control the state? Right. And then we have new capabilities in SQL Server 22 that now unlock the ability for the database engine to know what's in the snapshot. So now I can get point in time recovery or instantaneous seeding of availability groups between sites, even, which is a very hard thing to do sometimes. And so then we started to blur the lines between is a snapshot a backup because the database engine now knows what's in the snapshot, which is no different than a backup because the database engine knew what was written into the backup file, right? We can combine snapshots with log backups to get point in time recovery. So now we're starting to look at potentially having a recovery strategy that can use snapshots for instantaneous restores. But I would never give up native backups. Because there's other recovery patterns that I need to support for the business. Obviously, being able to blow back a database and revert it to a previous state that's 100 terabytes instantly, very fine business value.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I need to go pull a backup from 7 weeks ago to recover from a data anomaly that for a stored procedure that's not maybe balancing a book properly, or there's some other data anomaly or regulatory compliance that I need to solve for? Those are different scenarios, right? But SQL Server 22 blurs those lines between snapshots and backups to Anthony.
This leverages, from a pure standpoint, a bunch of the underlying data mobility methods. Refer back to a coffee break with Zane Allen, where we went through a bunch of, synchronous replication, continuous streaming replication, async, etc. But with that, we are into last section. We're going to run a little bit past the 45-minute mark for those wondering. Hopefully that's all right. Hopefully you're enjoying it. I always keep an eye on just folks are staying around. No one's leaving us yet. So I'll end the second poll here and share it. So you can see, folks running databases in the cloud, 43% production, but 22% only on-prem, and then, mixed doing test and dev. And we intentionally asked this question. So snapshots backup. So I'm going to try and remember this, Anthony. We're at 14% that say no, never. And, so actually, Olivia, if you don't mind, I'm going to stop sharing this one. Do you mind launching the third poll here, if that's all right? Where if you're like, that first question looks suspiciously familiar, you're right. We're curious to see if we change anybody's mind on the answers here. And maybe it'll go the other way. Maybe after that answer,
Right.
you're like, no, it's definitely not the case. Definitely not back. And then, are you using them with your databases today?
Right.
So we'll leave that open. Last section here is frankly a little bit of what's new in the space. I think I'll take I think we got kind of 4 items here, Anthony. I'll take the first one and hand the next one to you. So what's new everywhere you look? Databases. For bonus points, anyone out there, you can actually make a case that a pure storage array is actually a database. It's a key value. It's not really a storage array. It's a key value store that happens to store your data very, very carefully. That's how we can do a lot of neat things around compression and data reduction and thin provisioning, all that stuff, right? First of the 4 main items, SAP HANA. We have not talked nearly enough about SAP on Coffee Break as I would like, because, man, it's an important topic. But from a quantity of folks that care about it, it's not as many, maybe as some of the broader topics we try to embrace, but it's critical. This runs your business. So we have been a partner with SAP now for 7 years, and actually one of the only ones added there. So there's actually a great blog post on the website. You can see it here. Now, I guess I'll accept all the cookies. Actually we are now 7 years since we first partnered together, and we are now announcing that SAP HANA is certified with FlashArray File. With how FlashArray File is covered with John Carnes last year, is a first-class citizen to block on the pure storage array. Bunch of great capabilities there because SAP has an affinity in certain ways for various file level capabilities supported for that way. Next, it's been a little while since we've talked about Portworx and even the container landscape. But there's a whole offering around Portworx data services and some even specific support. I mean, there's a bunch of databases, but there's this logo right here, which is the current SQL logo. I'm pretty sure we got that right here, but I'll let you keep going here, Anthony.
Sure. So another element that was interesting to me when I came to Pure was our position around Kubernetes and software-defined storage in Kubernetes. So any cloud, any data center, any storage, being able to consume that in a programmatic way to provide a dynamic storage or way to provision and allocate storage to stateful applications is very cool to see. Then later on in my journey, PDS or Portworx Data Services was released, which allowed customers to provision database instances as a service in their environments, right? So giving you that PaaS or platform as a service cloud feel, but wherever you needed it, whether it be in the cloud, on-prem, on a cruise ship, or in a retail store, whatever that use case is, where you have to maintain a fleet of systems, especially as database systems. So if you look at the capabilities here, you have easy deployments, curated templates, you have backup policies and application consistent or application aware backups. And again, REST APIs. I love the API. Being able to provide these kind of day 2 operations to customers around database systems. And one of my goals when I came was to get SQL Server on the slide, and here it is. And so last year we put SQL Server into PDS. So we have a customer right now, about 400 retail stores in North America, that is going to be using Portworx to manage 400 SQL Server deployments across all of their stores. And this is the value that PDS brings, is being able to programmatically, we talked about earlier, orchestration, programmatically deploy hundreds of SQL servers across an environment and maintaining them in a very efficient way, right? And that's super important for our customers to be able to do that and cultivate those large database estates easily. Announcing for the first time today, will be coming out very, very soon, is an availability group implementation on PDS. So customers can get multiple replicas of a SQL Server instance and the database is on it across multiple nodes in a Kubernetes cluster to provide availability group functionality in Portworx data services.
Very cool. Just what sticks with me there is the deploy across 400 stores SQL Server with a couple of lines of YAML and keeping and updating identical config. That's super powerful, or maybe even stuff that you just wouldn't even try to do if you couldn't do it this way. It just wouldn't be feasible, kind of thing from a cost and administrative people overhead standpoint.
Right.
We've explored a good bit of snapshots, which is really, bending space and time thanks to metadata on array and then making them portable. Sometimes what you want is you just want the fastest way to blow data here, move it there, et cetera. I actually have a retailer that I've worked with where they call actually FlashBlade. So FlashBlade is part of the Pure portfolio that can do very high throughput. Okay. They call FlashBlade their data portability engine between their Oracle instances. They run physical Oracle on different boxes, and they want to move it around periodically, kind of thing. So this is now talking about SQL Server with Oracle in a second, but just the idea that you have high enough throughput, an order of magnitude higher, you could do some interesting things.
Oh yeah.
Back to you, Anthony.
So when SQL Server 22 came out, they brought the ability to back up native SQL Server backup. So backup database 2 and S3 bucket. And right at that time, we released a new FlashBlade S. And I was like, hey, let's put these two things together in a lab. And this is the output of that testing. So what we have here on the screen is two charts, one showing 8 SQL Server instances backing up at the same time on the right there. Yep. And a backup and restore rate of about 62 terabytes an hour. Rough math, that's about a terabyte a minute. Right. At the time, that was a single chassis environment. We now have multi-chassis, so we can push that number a little bit higher. But the real value isn't just the terabyte a minute number, but it's the fact that I could run 8 concurrent backups very quickly into a device and not have to do the backup Tetris that DBAs normally have to do.
Yeah.
Right. That's going to tip over my backup target. And so that scale out architecture of a FlashBlade solves a very interesting problem for DBAs that do native database backups, which we all do, even though I just talked about snapshots. We still are never going to get rid of native backups. But here we are blowing native backups into a FlashBlade at a very high data rate. And we could even we actually, for this specific test, we ran out of compute driving the test. The FlashBlade itself still had more meat on the bone. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So the number on the left, though, is a single instance. This was a VMware cluster that was 8 VMs running across 8 hosts. And then we took one. Like, what does one like reasonably sized SQL Server look like? This was 8 cores, 24 gigs of RAM. I believe it was a 10 terabyte database at the time. And no, it's bigger than that. And we saw 8 terabytes an hour and 12 terabytes an hour on restore. So kind of more reasonable numbers. But the real hello element is being able to back up many instances concurrently into this device and not have it tip over, which to you means your backup windows, which generally you have this much time and your backups take this much time, get smaller, right? Because you're able to do these things in a concurrent way.
I think I'm going to summarize, because this is not meant to be just SQL Server, it's Oracle. We actually have an update coming on soon on some of the Oracle numbers, but what you just talked about from a SQL Server standpoint, apply that to Oracle RMAN as well. We're not trying to inherently play favorites here from a database standpoint, because they're both valuable and used a lot.
Right.
Last poll.
I do want to spike the football on one thing. That was S3 testing. SMB has similar data rates as well. Similar. We'll be publishing a paper on that in the next week, covering kind of the full suite of S3, SMB, and then also into the various FlashBlades that we have for their performance capacity profiles.
Just so everyone can see it, and we're just about done here today. Our snapshots backups. I'm not going to try and do a fast analysis of if we change the answer, folks. We may look at that later. The majority of folks are using snapshots for their databases, but number 2 is I tried it before and I had issues. So there might be some goodness and value that you can go back and look at. Olivia, if you don't mind launching the 4th poll here, because that will lead us into the final Short topic: are you using S3 with your databases? You've alluded to this, Anthony, because this is now what's new from an industry standpoint as well as a pure capability. What do?
Mhm. So we teach a lot internally, Andrew and I, and the term traditional databases has become a thing, or legacy databases has become a thing, and it's kind of become a joke
They're all
on our
good.
team.
They're all good.
And so, what I really want folks to understand about even a database like SQL Server or Oracle is these are big companies with smart people that work there that are trying to figure out what the next thing is, right? Where developers are putting data, where applications are going to be putting data in the future. And S3 is one of those places. And so you'll see things like SQL Server or Oracle or Postgres have the ability to reach out into an S3 bucket and read or write data. And that's of extraordinary value to you as a DBA and to you as a business for a couple of reasons. One is imagine an application that just emits data and parks it in a bucket. Well, historically, you'd have to have a job that would ingest that data. There'd be some third-party tool that would stick it into the block side of the house in a relational database. Well, in Oracle 19 and SQL Server 2022, you have the ability to say, you know what, just read that data in that bucket over there at runtime. So I can say select whatever from that table, which is actually backended by an S3 bucket. So the data that's in that bucket is now read into the database engine, right? Now you could take that and you could stick it into a table, or you could just access it at runtime as just described. And that provides a lot of value to businesses now because you can get that data in and out of a database engine with no external tools, right? So that's, I think, extraordinary value to accessing data, but also archiving data over time. Because how many of us have databases with transactions in them from 1997? Imagine being able to take those transactions and stick them on the object, and so that you can reduce the size of the database on the block side and the relational side. So you don't have to do complex things like partitioning. Your tables get smaller, so your indexing strategy can get simpler. And this gets the kind of a simplicity play overall on how we're representing data in our systems. And so both Oracle has done this, SQL Server has done this, and they're using tools and techniques that you're already familiar with, things like Open Row Set and external table. So really powerful constructs there. And Andy's written a bunch of stuff on this on his blog, and also at Past Summit last year, he did a whole presentation on this exact topic.
Andy, if you haven't put your blog post in the chat, please make sure to. I also wanted to highlight Ron Eakins, who's an Oracle ace, one of a very small number. I can't remember the number of folks that are validated by Oracle, not working for Oracle, is like really knowing their stuff. So he's done some great posts on this from an Oracle standpoint. Actually, I'm working with S3 with Oracle. There's the SQL side. Obviously, this is supported by the most robust, fast on-premises S3 implementation out there, which is in FlashBlade. I think that brings us all the way home, Anthony. I think I'm gonna wrap it here if that's all right. We'll have just a couple minutes left for questions. As always, thanks for being a great guest. I know you would. We were doing this a little bit last week. We're doing it this week, different context, but having fun. If you stayed around for the drawing, hopefully you stayed around for more than just that, but just in case, this is for the Ember mug, retail value $130 or so. The kind that you can control with your phone because, hey, it's actually valuable. Kind of cool, too. The winner for that is Nick Z from Washington. Thanks for staying with us the whole time. Actually, still, just be honest, I always kind of keep an eye on attendance here. Just about everyone is still with us. We'll have a minute or two for some questions. We'll pull up. Sean and Andy have done a great job. Make sure, please, to join us next month. And Olivia, if you'd be kind enough to toss the link in the chat there for this so folks can see it, for Choose Your Own Restore Adventure, Pure's modern data protection portfolio. For me, this is going to date me, but when the graphic team came up with this, I thought of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, but from Coffee Grounds a little bit too. So that goes back to, games when I was a kid. And I should actually be good here. Right before we get to questions, I'm going to end the last poll here, and I'll share it out just so you can see too, from your peers. So, about 1,300 respondents, 46%, the majority, Anthony, are using S3 with their databases today. That's
sweet.
That's pretty
I'm
cool.
impressed.
That's great adoption. We could get picky about how much and the quantities, but to me, that actually feels really almost maybe higher than I might have expected. So with that, I'm going to pull over the Q&A here. And maybe I'll actually turn the music back on a little bit and just kind of keep it low just to, this is where we relax and let our hair down, such as it is. Appreciate all the commentary in the chat and just a lot of great discussion. I'm not even going to try and go back there. One that I am going to call, this is from Jeff. Just being real, this isn't about databases, but I'll answer it briefly. With some changes in the VMware landscape, what are we seeing from customers and can Pure help? The answer is absolutely. We're happy to chat about this. We have a very strong partnership and continue to with VMware. However, actually, the session that we were at last week, Anthony, the discussion was about the larger virtualization landscape and many different ways that we can support customers. So please reach out to your Pure account team. That's a great discussion to have about the various ways that we can provide the value of Pure in other environments. I'm going to actually pull back to the answered because this is where there was one, I think, Anthony, it was from Lynn at the very beginning about how's your background as a DBA influenced your approach to working with Pure and unique perspectives. I feel like that basically this whole time was you answering that question over the last 40 minutes, so, which is cool. Maybe I'll pull one here because we didn't go down the AI path quite as much from David. I'm intentionally leaving off last names, folks, just in case they don't want to be identified, But from David, what impact do you see AI will have on the database industry, and how does that correlate with the impact for storage? So you want to pull the AI and database thread a little bit?
Sure. The immediate impact that I've been invested in is to help understand performance anomalies in systems. Right. If I have baselines, performance trends about a particular platform, I can use ML, which is a subset of AI, to help me identify anomalies. And that's something that I'm invested in personally to help understand workload regressions, understand anything that might have changed in a data center and looking at those kind of elements. Now, certainly we could apply that to any problem domain for anomaly detection, things like that. But that's the space that I'm playing in literally right now. I have some containers up on my laptop right now that are doing that exact thing.
I think that's the reason that I'm hosting this off my machine, because you're busy running containers on your machine is what it sounds like. So, yeah. All right. Yeah. There were some great ones along the way, and this was just fun to see, like, Neil asked no mention of in-memory databases like SAP HANA. And then, hey, we hit on SAP HANA a little bit. Not quite, but, we
that's
got
a database.
It does, that matters too. It's such a huge landscape, kind of thing. There was one other one here that I wanted to pull out before we end. So from Bill, we went here somewhat, but I feel like I'll toss it back in case there's anything else you want to put in. Can you talk about replicating snapshots to Cloud Block Store? I'm going to presume that means from FlashArray on-prem to Cloud Block Store as a means of refreshing a data source for and I'm going to read it as it's written, for a Microsoft Fabric Data Lake ETL. So I don't mind embracing that and just push that a little further.
Yeah, so that's a common pattern that we see. So we'll have on-prem customers that have large data sets that will leverage snaps, let's just say asynchronous replication of snapshots to get data into the cloud, which then they'll feed PaaS services from that snapshot. And again, that kind of erodes that transport problem that you might have seen. So that's a common pattern that we've seen even before the days of Fabric in the previous iterations of, let's just say, foundational elements of the Fabric product, right?
Awesome. I think with that, we are actually I'm going to cheat just because of folks. Do you have time for one more question, Anthony?
Sure.
This is one from Jeff. What happens if the database is using encryption, TDE, table level encryption, and do snapshots only replicate changed bytes, or all the bytes considered new? I only put this in because we ironically talked about this topic last week.
Yep.
So do you mind exploring a little bit of the database encryption side impact on the storage rate, and maybe even what it really gets you versus not?
Is this person reading my DMs right now? I had someone asked me this exact question this morning. So if I have a database that's encrypted, right, and I snapshot and clone that, well, the storage is still physically the same. But what I can't do with that clone is access that data unless I take the certificate chain from that first SQL server and put it on the second SQL server. Then I can read that data and decrypt it. But the physical stuff doesn't change because SQL Server's encryption is deterministic. So as I change things, we'll get a little bit of data efficiency there too. So if I have an encrypted database and it's on the same flash array, it's going to data reduce perfectly every time. The difference is if I take that thing and I put it on another SQL Server instance and I change the encryption key and then things start getting encrypted again, then that goes out the window. And so you get some efficiencies in the snapshot and cloning process, but not compared to what we'd have without TDE involved. And Andy Yoon's got another great blog post on TDE and what that means in a pure storage platform. So you definitely want to get that in the chat before we go. The other element the baselining element that we talked about earlier, that also applies to encrypted databases as well. You'll lose the compression elements associated with our platform.
Piece, I think there's just and this, we'll probably say this for later one-on-one conversations. It's worth engaging yourself and Andy or other folks about what does TDE actually get you. Can it or other types of encryption be potentially enabled or disabled with or without admin privileges? It's sometimes worth digging into that a little bit too, just to make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting, from a security standpoint. With that, we are at the end. For folks that stayed an extra 2 minutes with us for, I mean, encryption is the most fun topic to, go around, but it felt like a good question. Good to explore. Please join us next month with Jason Walker. I'm drawing a blank on what the date is, but you will get a reminder on this. As always, thank you from the entire Coffee Break team. I could not do this without so many of the other folks at Pure, as well as all my wonderful guests. And you, this month, Anthony, you're the most wonderful guest ever. I might say that next month.
You're the most wonderful
this month,
host ever.
You're amazing. Yeah. So thanks again. Thank you all for joining us. Hope you have a great day, great week, great month.